I'm Dan.
And I'm Alex.
And welcome back to On Air, everybody. Alex, how are you doing? Long time no speak.
Yeah, it's funny because we didn't have obviously last week's episode due to Easter. And if you were unaware as a listener as to why the episode wasn't in your feeds, you just had to head over to Instagram to see quickly the reminder that there wouldn't have been one last week due to the Easter break. But we are back. Good to hear from you. Good to speak with you as ever. I know you've been extremely busy globe-trotting again.
Yeah.
And I'm here. I've put the kettle on and I'm just ready to sit and listen, really.
Well, yeah, I was very grateful that it was Easter last week because time was very limited. I've been traveling with my friends in Thailand and Vietnam. It's quite an experience traveling because I've been friends with them since I was 9. So since then, we've kind of taken very different paths. We converge every year on some kind of trip, but, you know, we often talk, you and I, about luxury and about this kind of stuff, but they are very hardcore budget. So it was a bit of a transition, you could say, for me to get into that. And if you follow me on Instagram, I know, Alex, you were horrified to see the airlines I was flying in order to get the cheapest tickets.
Look, it's not a case of being horrified. It's like fascinated, admiration, and also I wouldn't get on that kind of different approach to seeing you move around in the region that you were in. But I mean, you're so familiar now, aren't you? You've lived in Southeast Asia. You are constantly in and out of the different countries that you love there. On this trip, you were in Thailand and Vietnam. What was the sketchiest there was one airline that I quite literally, and it takes a lot for this to happen, quite literally had never heard of.
Exactly. Same here. So that was, drumroll, Viet Travel Airlines. And when I was searching for flights, we were supposed to go to Chiang Mai, which is in northern Thailand. But Thailand
I have been to Chiang Mai.
It's
I've
amazing.
Been to Chiang Mai. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah. So the problem was Thailand was scorching. It was like, the weather said feels like 43 degrees. So we were
Wow.
After 3 days in Bangkok, we thought we can't do this anymore. Although it was amazing, it's just a bit too much. So we decided let's change plans and go to northern Vietnam, where it's like 7 degrees colder, which makes a big difference. So we were looking at, first of all, it took me a lot to convince them to change flights because we already had those booked. They were very cheap, but non-refundable, the Chiang Mai ones. So I was checking, all right, what is there from Bangkok to Hanoi? And then on Google Flights, I'm like, okay, AirAsia. Obviously, my preferred options were Thai Airways, number one, Vietnam Airlines second. Both of those were like $600, $700, $800 for 3 tickets. And my friends were like, when they saw AirAsia was $300, they were like, why are we flying Thai for double? But then for $180 for 3 people, we had an airline I had never heard of, Viet Travel Airlines. And at first I thought, is this like a bus or a tour agency? What is going on? So
at first, when I had seen the side of the aircraft delivery, I was thinking, well, that's not Viet Jet. So I know Viet Jet, which of course kind of looks like AirAsia, doesn't it, from the outside? It's a very similar livery. This was not Viet Jet. This was some kind of, it looks like a Lithuanian wet lease.
Yes,
right?
100%. So when I Googled it, I realized, okay, it's a very new Vietnamese airline. They have 3 A321s. That's all. Of course, I checked the safety records. I couldn't find any even minor incidents. Of course, it's such a small airline. I don't even know if the incidents get reported. Vietnam,
of course they do. Come on. Vietnam is incredibly safe in terms of an aviation sector.
Yes, it is. And they recently, a few years ago, I guess, were recategorized by, is it the FAA that categorized them so that they can fly to the US?
That is the case, yeah. So, of course, it's funny. The FAA, America, which is currently all over the headlines for every single flaw in commercial aviation safety, America is also the entity that looks around the rest of the world and says, we think you're safe enough now to come to these great shores of ours, which, of course, sometimes is appropriate. And other times it's like, hello, have you seen what is going on in your own backyard?
Yeah, totally. And we'll get to an interesting case where that's kind of changing, where they're looking more at their own airlines in a few minutes. But
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, I was slightly sketched out. We got on the flight. It was a bizarre experience. It was a former Air Berlin A321, was cool, but it's the first flight I think I've ever taken, especially on a low-cost airline, where the crew stayed in the galley the entire flight, almost 2 hours. They didn't pop their head out to sell anything, even though they had like the biggest menu with like 30 different hot meals you could order. I didn't see the crew once. Other than that, it was fine. One of my friends
This
slept.
all sounds a little bit Iberia, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, true. This is the Vietnamese Iberia. One thing I'm fascinated by is people like one of my friends who can just sleep in any airplane seat. They get on and pass out, wake up when it's time to get off. I just can't do that.
That's a gift.
It is. And especially
to
like
be able to...
these are, since it's a former Air Berlin plane, they're still using Air Berlin's cabins. So it's really intra-European ironing board, upright, super thin slimline seat. And he just sits down, passes out.
Do you think sometimes, I mean, there is a benefit to knowing a lot about something. And of course, we know a lot about commercial aviation and also the whole passenger experience and all the kind of different aspects. For example, you will have been probably the only person maybe to have ever flown that airline, if it's so small, to have known properly that you were on a former Air Berlin aircraft and to like just explain to a listener how do you know this? I mean, I know how you know this, but how do you know this? And then is there evidence when you're in the cabin itself?
Yeah. So I have to say I felt a bit disappointed in myself because I boarded and I was first of all, what I didn't even mention here that makes it incredibly sketch is that this airline does not exist on Flight Radar. It does not appear on the departure board, the arrival board on Flight Radar.
Red flag.
It doesn't have a logo on Flight Radar. It doesn't, nothing. Yeah, there's nothing about it. Then
does it appear on radar when you're airborne?
Yes. But
I was going to say, because it must have the ADSB, must have the the ADSB connection, which is how aircraft become visible on Flight Radar.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of data missing from it. And even this was the crazy part, going on Bangkok Airport's website, since I couldn't see it on the departure list on Flight Radar, I go there, search for departures, I put in the flight number, and it goes airline. There was no name on the airline when I searched it. And it just said destination Marsa Alam, Egypt. I was like, what? I'm flying to Hanoi, not Egypt. So much sketch leading up to it. Get on board, obviously.
Hold on. So none of this even prevents you having a conversation, maybe not with your friends, but with yourself about, should this be, I mean, so... You realize that even on the airport itself, so you flew from Bangkok, didn't you?
Yeah,
right? And you're going
Bangkok
to
Hanoi.
And it's not even on Bangkok's website in terms of being a departure. And when it does show up, it shows that it's a departure to Egypt.
Yes.
And you're fine with that. And you just...
Well, what was I supposed to do? Was I supposed to tell my friends, sorry, guys, let's just cancel everything and stay here and pour more of your money
I think
down
at
the
that
drain?
point, I'd be questioning whether or not I've actually booked a flight that exists or on an airline that exists, or if you've been scammed or something. So were you relieved when you actually got to Bangkok Airport and you saw the departure screens point you to the check-in? I assume you went to a check-in desk.
Yeah. Of course I was. And the sketchiness continued there. So yeah, I was just like, let's just see what happens.
Do you have a visa for Egypt, sir? Like hi, I'm flying to Hanoi.
Yeah,
do you need Oh no, you don't need a visa for Egypt. Okay, you're good to go. But
sir,
we're going to Hanoi. Yes.
Your flight to Hanoi is via Marsa Alam, Egypt. We didn't tell you.
What the hell?
So yeah, of course, in my mind, I'm always like, this, if nothing else, will be a great video. That's kind of the silver lining. So we get to the
opportunist, the opportunist YouTuber, ladies and gentlemen, never not thinking about the clicks.
Yeah. So another sketchy thing at the check-in desk, they have, just as we're checking in, I look down and there's like a printout of many, many pages of A4. And on it is the name of every single passenger on the flight. But not only that, the full details of their booking. So their booking reference, the amount they paid, their credit card numbers, all listed out, just lying there on the check-in desk. So I'm just like, okay, I recorded it for my video. I'm obviously going to blur all the info, but just like, she didn't even mind me recording that list. I was like, okay, data protection at its finest.
My God. So you know what that reminds me of? And I'm really interested now to find out if something has changed in France, because I now don't remember seeing this over the last couple of years. But until a couple of years ago, literally until maybe 2021, do you have experiences of checking in at any hotel in France and they would ask for a credit card for pre-authorization in case, incidentals or whatever? And if you were to provide it, they get out a notebook and they write down everything, the long card number, the expiry date. That is business, or that at least it was until very, very, very recently, business as usual in France. And every single time I used to say, this is insane. Well, why are you writing it? No, you either pre-authorize it in the chip and pin machine or you don't take it. What if that little book is stolen? I don't understand. And by the way, this was everywhere. This was, for example, every time I was going in and out of Airbus, every hotel that I said, okay, you can have the card, or they said, no, it's a condition for you to get the room key. We need a card for pre-authorization. They'd take out like a notebook and they'd start writing 398, and I'd be like,
that's
what?
Crazy.
Maybe now that doesn't exist because of data, like, the way in which EU GDPR and data protection rules and laws have strengthened. But so to think that was happening in France just until recently, I mean, it doesn't really surprise me that it's happening with this kind of sketchy, unknown, recently
Vietnamese airline
launched low cost carrier, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Very
I
much
guess
so.
Since it was cheaper than anything else, which is not surprising if you're flying an airline you've never heard of. But speaking of that, a couple things. I'll get back to the story, but first of all, there's so many countries in the world at check-in, both at airports and at hotels, where people just take a photo of your passport on their phone and send it somewhere. And I'm like,
I hate it.
That's not even a company phone. That's your private phone. Your background is like a picture of your kid and you're taking a photo of my passport. What are you going to do with that?
I hate it. I come to accept I was at a Bloomberg conference recently, and the line was really long, and someone knew me who was processing, and he said, "I'll do it. I'll do your pass. Just go and wait." And I said, "Oh, thank you so much. Just printing." He said, "Show me your ID." And then I did it, and I was talking with the guy in the queue at the same time, and I felt bad that now I was going to leave the queue and be done, and he was still going to be queuing. So I said to him, "Could you do the guy that I'm standing with as well?" Just because it's... And he said, yeah, fine. I get his passport. So I had to say to the guy, do you mind if we can do your pass, just forward your passport copy to WhatsApp? He was like, yeah, sure. I said, I'm going to delete it after in front of you. I'm going to show the guy, then I'm going to delete it. He goes, oh, please. It was like, the way that this world is set up, everyone has my passport on their phones. It's just nothing that we can control anymore. And I was thinking, unfortunately, he's absolutely right. It bothers me so much, especially when people are just doing it for quick, easy responses at airports, or, that to get data, or to get... oh, this passenger wants to request his seat. Oh, who is it? And they take a picture of the passport and forward it to their manager who's in the upstairs office, and so on and so on. I hate that. Just the other day, I was in a scenario where was I? And if you were under 30, you got a discount. So they said, do you have your passport with you? I said, of course no. I don't carry my passport out and about. And I said, I've got a copy of it. Okay, great. Held it up to her so that she could verify my age, and she went to take a photo of it. And I said to her, is it necessary to take a photo of it, or can you just... And then she goes, oh, okay, yes, I can just see. Okay, yes, I'll process it. So I was thinking, if I didn't just ask that's just another pointless phone that my passport sits on. As you say, her lock screen is her newborn. It's not in a work capacity. It just bothers me. Me.
And on that note, if you have an iPhone, guys, I don't know if you know this, Alex, but the latest update or like a very recent one, they greatly increased security in case your phone is stolen. So you can like update your security settings if the phone is stolen. So it's basically thieves won't get any value of it ever. Like it will be unusable. So I recommend updating that. One last security
I
thing on
updated
this
last
tangent.
night. Literally
Perfect.
updated in the night. Yeah.
Good,
There you
good.
go.
One more point about this tangent we're on. I saw a TikTok that I was like, this is actually good advice. I never really thought about it before, but someone said, if a hotel, when you're checking into a hotel, it's so common. I think this is especially more relevant for women, but it's so common for them to be like, okay, sir, here's your key. You're in room 772.
No. I'm good at that.
Yeah.
I know what you're going to say.
So
I was like,
everyone hears what room you're in.
Yes.
So this person said, if they do that, you hand
Yeah.
them back the key and you say, give me another room, please. And do not say the room number out loud. I can read it on the keys so that no one can hear what room you're in. I think that's just a good little note.
I try to preempt them about to do it, and he says, okay, so, and I quickly in time say, yep, okay, yep, so I've got that, that's the room number, okay, and then close the
Good.
thing. Because that's insane. They shout it out, as you said. Now, I wouldn't be as worried, but for example, if that was, as you say, solo traveling, young female standing in it, that's you've really got risks there, but still, I hate that. There's so much trust that our entire kind of thing of travel has. Even do you never just stand at the baggage carousel and just think, this is bizarre?
It's like grab whatever you want, literally,
yeah,
right?
It's just the most weirdly trusting thing.
Yeah.
That, oh, you can't do this and you can't, don't you dare take over 100 mil and blah, 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 blah. Oh, but 350 people were on that aircraft and now their entire life's belongings in some scenarios
Yeah.
are paraded in front of you for anybody to pick up and go home with.
And you just see someone's like $2,000 limited edition Remova with a first class tag on it. And you're like, that would be so easy to steal for someone else. I mean, I've never been like, that's a great idea, but yeah, it's scary. And that's also why I don't carry or why I don't really use expensive luggage, because I don't want to be a target. Yeah. I want, my bag to look rough, dirty, low key. So people will be like, okay, this is probably filled with just like the cheapest clothes.
There's a new Instagram bio for you. Rough, dirty and low key.
So me. Okay, let's quickly get back to I didn't even answer a question about how do we know it's an Air Berlin aircraft? How do we figure that out?
How do you know exactly?
Yeah. So once I got on board, once the plane landed in Bangkok, I could see the registration by seeing planes on ground. So once getting on board, I looked up the registration, and then there's several websites like Air Fleets, Plane Spotters, many different ones where you get the registration and you can see the whole history of the aircraft. So this specific one I saw was delivered 10 years ago to Air Berlin. Of course, Air Berlin went bankrupt. So yeah, it ended up there eventually in Vietnam, and that's the plane I had. But once I knew that, I was seeing the signs everywhere. It was so I was so blinded before, but then I was like, oh my God, that's the Air Berlin logo on the bulkhead. Wait, it says, where it says fasten your seatbelt, life vests under your seat. That also says in German. So there were all these signs that I could have picked up on, but I guess I just had I was looking for that afterwards.
So you didn't find any pretzels stashed down the back of the seat or any of the Love Heart chocolates. They were delicious.
Yeah. Wow. It's a huge loss actually that we don't have Air Berlin, because that was such a great one world airline in the heart of Europe.
You're so right.
That could get it. And now I just feel like One World has a huge hole in continental Europe,
Yeah, it's true. One World is just really IAG driven now in Europe, isn't it? And and that's where we are.
Yeah.
I last flew Air Berlin about 6 months before they wrapped up ops, and I remember thinking, there's not many airlines that are kind of like this, and that's why it was a shame as to the fact that they were on their way out. Am I correct in saying they're kind of like, I know I've used this before as an example, but like a monarch of Europe, but but in one world with greater reach. They just felt a little bit. It didn't feel low cost.
No, but was it supposed to be low cost?
No, but most of the airlines now that are even legacy end up feeling low cost.
Yeah.
You know?
So I never flew Monarch, so it's hard for me to compare, but I always felt like Air Berlin was just another Lufthansa, or although Lufthansa was my favorite airline back then, I was like, they're just another standard airline. I did fly them transatlantic a couple times, once in 2012, and I ended up on one of their old A330s without entertainment. So it was like a 8-hour flight from Berlin to New York without any entertainment. And as a teenager, that was like before the age of like everyone having smartphones, let alone downloading stuff on your phone. Yeah. So, at that age, every minute feels like an eternity. So that was one of the most horrible flights of my life, just sitting there waiting. When is this over? When is this over? And that was rough. I have one more story before we get into news. And this is what I've been dying to tell you because I've never experienced this before. And it was a shocking thing for me. So
I'm ready.
When I was leaving Vietnam, I flew Hanoi to Hong Kong, a 1.5-hour flight. I was in Vietnam Airlines business class because I had said goodbye to my friends, and I thought back to how it's supposed to be, put me in the front. Like, I need this, treat myself. So
goodbye, friends. And he leaves his backpack at the door. He takes off his dirty clothes. He puts on a fresh shirt and he runs towards the lounge.
Literally. I was like, new day, new me. Let's reset. That was literally me. I did, gift them into a priority pass lounge and then said farewell. They were flying via travel back to Bangkok to then take north,
you
low
like your
cost,
friends
back to 12 hours to Norway. And I was just like, see you later, hasta luego, or whatever you say. So anyway, get on board. Vietnam Airlines has a fascinatingly old cabin, and the seats look like mustard, but that's another discussion.
What aircraft?
A321. So 321. Of course, we've spoken about this a lot as well. You check seat maps before your flight to see if the seats, for example, in a business class like that's 2-2, will be empty next to you. Of course, that makes a huge difference. So leading up to the flight, I could see business was quite empty. The seat next to me was empty. Get on board, the seat is empty. Boarding completes, and the seat is empty. But as I'm sitting there enjoying myself, the pre-departure service was great on Vietnam Airlines. I hear a bit of commotion behind me in economy. People are moving around, and there's no cabin divider on Vietnam Airlines. So I could see everything that was going on, and people are shuffling around, changing seats. And I hear this Frenchman, and I'm not going to do a French accent, but this older Frenchman going, I can't sit here. And the crew go, but sir, we're offering you extra legroom seats. This is the bulkhead row. It has a great legroom. He goes, no, this is not enough. I can't sit here. And they go, sir, please, this is a chargeable seat. We're offering it for free. Please take a seat here. No, this is not enough. This won't do. I want to sit there. And he points at the seat next to me. And they're like, sir, that's business class. You can't sit here. So for 2 minutes, they're going back and forth. And eventually, they just give in and let him sit next to me.
What?
Yeah. So then...
Well, it's not just... I'm not gasping because they let him sit next to you. Sorry. They just let him because he wanted a complimentary upgrade on board. They just let him upgrade.
Here's the context I didn't know. So he sits down next to me. First of all, before I tell you the reason he was justifying the upgrade, even when he was standing one row behind fighting with the crew, I could smell the stench of sweat and cigarette smoke in my row. It was so bad, so pungent. I was like, oh God, please don't let him sit next to me. Please don't let him sit next to me. And he comes and sits next to me.
Shit.
Smells so bad. Looks at me, smiles. His teeth are like rotting. I'm like, okay, this is great. But then he goes like to explain why he's sitting there. He lifts up his left pant leg, and he shows that he's an amputee. So I'm like, okay, that leads to an interesting discussion, which we can have in a second. So when he sits down, the crew goes, "Sir, so you can sit here, but unfortunately, we can't provide you with a business class meal." And I'm like, what? He didn't even pay for a business class meal. So then they bring him a cold towel, pre-departure beverages. He ends up getting the whole business class experience, and they bring him a meal anyway. So it was an interesting thing because it makes me think of discussions we've had about like when a family is traveling together and they ask you to switch seats. Do you let them, because of their poor planning, to be a good person, or do you say no thank you? So that's one of those situations where, well, if I really don't know what's the right thing here, but I definitely think that his tone was very much expecting to get to sit in business class.
Maybe it had happened on the previous sector.
Could have happened, which would have been even crazier because that was
So there was a kind of
from France.
A precedent.
Yeah,
right?
But yeah, so it was the expectation that he was going to sit there. And so he told me, like, he was trying to make conversation with me, and I wasn't really, into talking to him that much, but he was basically like, I live in Hong Kong. I've been at home in France for several months. So I was like, if you live in Hong Kong and you've supposedly lived there for years, the culture in East and Southeast Asia, that the way you're treating this crew is going to make them extremely uncomfortable. They don't want to enter into a conflict. This is no like US, flight attendant situation where they're going to fight back. He knew that. I'm pretty sure that he manipulated the situation to be like, they're going to give in eventually because the culture is that they're not going to start a fight with me.
Or maybe he was exploiting that part of things. I mean, okay, so this is an interesting one, kind of morally, ethically. Where is the line? Not where is the line, but how, does that mean we accommodate, does that mean on the same aircraft they should have accommodated anyone with either a disability, perhaps a hidden disability?
Yeah.
That's where it gets a bit hazy, because what about the kid 10 rows behind who really may have needed that extra space because of some form of hidden disability, for example? Did they check that the elderly person also at the rear of the aircraft wasn't suffering from XYZ? That's the weird part, isn't it? So because he was vocal, he was accommodated.
Yeah.
Does that mean then that the overwhelming advice, for example, if you're flying Vietnam Airlines, is that if you have something that leads you to require more space or makes the confines of an aircraft cabin particularly uncomfortable because of some form of perhaps medical reason, does that mean that you simply book the lowest fare, alert the crew, and then by default you are accommodated? In aviation, it doesn't actually work like that. That's not how it works, as you know, across the sector. And passengers have a choice when they book as to how they can make their flying experience more comfortable. I'll take it on a normal, for example, a European level, which is that a lot of people are unaware that actually you can buy an extra seat. For example, if you're flying EasyJet and you book a €20 fare from one part of Europe to another, if they are still offering a second €20 fare after you have booked, you can book another ticket and the seat next to you, and you can put as the passenger name, first name empty, last name seat, and you have that booking. There is actually an official policy to follow, and it's online, and you follow that, and then you can have an extra seat for space, for a musical instrument, there's a whole variety of different reasons as to why. So, what he did in that scenario is not precedent, is not how it works in air travel, as you know. But it is an interesting one, as you say, because look at what my reaction was the moment you said to me, and he was showing that he was an amputee, and so immediately I said, oh, okay, well, that's why.
And the thing is,
it's that gut instinct. Oh, okay,
And the whole situation sits wrong with me because I really feel like he was, using that when, like, look, you're on a flight from Vietnam to Hong Kong. You're a white European from Paris who's you could have flown direct in Air France premium economy, for example. It would have been the same seat as this. It wouldn't have been so bad. The crew offered you an extra legroom seat in economy, which actually had more legroom than the business class seat had. And think about, like, let's say a Vietnamese person was in the same situation. I doubt, because of their culture, I'm pretty much guarantee that they would not have done the same thing. So to me, it's just like such a bad look. And I'm really disappointed that the crew let him do it after also offering him extra legroom economy, because it makes me think of that expression. I think it goes something like, an emergency on your part doesn't a lack of bad planning on your part doesn't constitute an emergency on my part. Something like that.
Which is kind of what we were discussing, wasn't it, last week in the Q&A, or the week before rather, in the Q&A about how, accommodating those that haven't planned in some scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think 100% I sympathize with him and the discomfort he must experience when traveling. But at the same time, you have like 10 people sitting in business class who have paid full fare, $500 for a 2-hour flight instead of $150 for economy. And then you march on board demanding that you get to sit there among all those paying passengers. So it's a tough situation. We'd love to hear what you guys
It's an interesting one. Yeah. If you're listening and you have thoughts on this, get in touch, even if it's not a question, because it is an interesting one that extends to many different areas of the air travel world,
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, let's dive into some of what has been happening globally, and we shall begin with this interesting. Well, firstly, actually, we will begin with the 320 Neo issues, because this is something that we've spoken about previously. It is something that many of our listeners will be aware of. We know that across the world, A320neo operators have faced disruption due to Pratt & Whitney engine issues, right? These have been ever since Dan and I met. When Dan and I met for the very first time, Lufthansa's first ever A320neo delivery, we were sat with the Pratt & Whitney team who was saying, yeah, it's going to be 6 weeks until we fix it. And that was however many, a decade ago? Something like that.
Nearly 10 years ago.
Almost 10 years ago, right? And still, there are airlines that are going to be cutting capacity this summer because of the issues. That's on Airbus's side. On Boeing's side, everyone's very familiar with what's happening right now in the US with production at Boeing. They are under several different investigations. There are different investigations happening in different jurisdictions. And in addition to that, we have airlines that are not going to be receiving aircraft as planned due to the way in which Boeing is now having to press pause on certain things. The overwhelming kind of what this all kind of equates to is that this year airlines will receive 20% fewer aircraft than what they had expected due to the issues at both Airbus and Boeing. 20% fewer aircraft. So these are airlines that are forward planning by selling you tickets a year in advance. And now a significant portion of that route network, that schedule that they have published and sold to you, the fare paying passenger, in some scenarios, they will simply be unable to deliver because of the way in which they are not receiving aircraft. So globally, the picture is 20% fewer. If we zoom into the US airlines will receive 32% fewer aircraft than what they had planned, which again is only going to equate into cuts to the schedules, flight cancellations this summer, and so on and so on. And you traveling around, for example, in Thailand and perhaps in Vietnam, but where were you seeing all of these parked Neos?
Yeah, so I saw a few in Thailand, but actually the majority, they're all over Hanoi airport, like everywhere on one side of the runway, like in the grass, there are VietJet A321neos. There are Vietnam Airlines A321neos, Bamboo Airways. Like there's so many parked everywhere. Everything is covered. And the thing is that almost 700 aircraft are going to be grounded this month due to these issues. A320neos, A220s, a couple Embraer 190s, but it's unbelievable. 700 of the most fuel efficient new aircraft are on the ground, and all people are talking about is Boeing's issue. But this is a huge separate issue. Like, this is pretty much the same impact as the 737 MAX grounding in 2019 in terms of number of aircraft on the ground.
It's an issue that has been present everywhere, but will really manifest once again this summer. And that is because of the way in which airlines had expected these issues to have been resolved by now. There are so many carriers that have come forward that are affected by this. Aegean, what has become almost the national airline of Greece, have said that they have reached a compensation agreement with Pratt & Whitney over the disruption with their A320neo family aircraft, and that those discussions continue and so on and so on. But compensation is one thing. Compensation doesn't actually mean quick fix or even real fix solutions for aircraft that can then perform as expected. So it's here that you quickly see, okay, if, for example, you see the headlines about Michael O'Leary, Ryanair CEO, warning about a summer of disruption, if you hear about how airlines will be unable to meet their targets this summer with blah, 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 blah. This year, this time around, most of it stems to these issues that both manufacturers are facing.
Yeah, to me, it's also crazy. So I was reading about the efficiency of the different engines. Pratt & Whitney's engine is supposedly, correct me if I'm wrong, a little bit more fuel efficient than CFM's engine on the A320neo. But of course, that doesn't matter if your aircraft can't even fly, if they're grounded. And we're not talking about a short grounding. I think the wait time to get the issues resolved and get a new engine or whatever they need to do with Pratt & Whitney is almost a year, right?
Yeah, it is. And even when Pratt & Whitney tend to declare an aircraft engines as fixed, updated, rectified, airlines have told me that actually that's not the end of it, that there's still ongoing maintenance updates that are required as Pratt & Whitney grapple with the same issue that they have had since you and I met.
Yeah. So basically, it's not helping anyone. It's not helping the airlines that the engine is a bit more efficient. It's not helping the environment because airlines are having to keep around old A320s, previous generation, to compensate for this engine not working properly. And another thing, I'm surprised we are still seeing airlines order or commit to the Pratt & Whitney engine, but we have
So am I.
Yeah, but we have huge airlines like Indigo, one of the biggest Airbus customers these days, low-cost airline in India, having shifted. So they originally ordered their first batch of A320s with Pratt & Whitney engines, but given the ongoing problems, they have now chosen to go over to the other engine option, CFM, for future deliveries. So, that's...
But
I would say that's
these decisions.
a good decision.
It is a good decision, but we're seeing these decisions made now in 2024 that airlines were making back in 2014, which just goes to show the sheer length of time that has passed that Pratt has faced these issues. Remember, we met on that Lufthansa A320neo delivery because Lufthansa became the launch customer by default when Qatar Airways pulled out of being the launch customer of the A320neo, because at the time the former CEO of the airline, Akbar al-Bakr, knew that the engine had issues, and he said, nope, we are not going to be launching the Pratt & Whitney engine that is going to have issues in an ordinary climate, let alone the hot, dusty Middle East. And so they didn't become the launch customer. They converted their order to 321neos, and their, of course, supplier is not Pratt & Whitney. They're going for the CFM LEAP. So
good.
Those were decisions taken a long time ago, and here we are now, same thing.
Same issue.
Same issue.
Yeah, let's talk about some other issues in the industry.
Okay, Dan, this caught my eye. This was on the One Man at a Time website. Is priority security illegal in Germany? That's what a German lawyer is suggesting, that apparently, in a nutshell, it's illegal because it's a federal requirement, right, to go through security, and therefore there are rules in which everybody is treated equally in something that is mandatory and federal law. And so if you are jumping the queue by having business class fast track, Star Alliance Gold, Senator, Hon Circle member, or whatever all these things are, then you are potentially violating the equality laws of Germany, where under German law, everyone is considered equal when it comes to participating in a mandatory public task. Did you see this? What do you think?
I don't know what I think. Of course, selfishly, I'm like, yeah, priority security is great. Of course, we should still have it. At the same time, I see the argument. I'm very surprised that we have priority security in Sweden, because Sweden is even more about equality than Germany, at least the feeling I get. But of course, I wouldn't like to see this happen. You know, I would like to see priority security remain. I think there are some interesting questions about what would banning priority security mean for politicians or for celebrities or people, because surely some people
What about that service
it.
that you do at Frankfurt Airport?
Yeah.
You do the whole...
Frankfurt Airport VIP services. That's also
Yeah.
paying, you know, a lot
You are
more than you would for just a priority ticket.
Yeah.
Yeah, there would be so many questions, and I feel like there are bound to be exceptions to that rule. And in those cases, who decides what the exception is? Who decides who can rightfully use it and who cannot? I feel like it makes things so much more complicated than just saying who paid for it and who didn't, you know?
I also feel like this guy was stuck in a long queue. Okay.
Oh, totally.
And
he saw the people
everybody
breeze
just
by.
kept passing by. I mean, it was probably on a day you and I were there, and one after the other, you know, we were flashing the one world status or whatever, the Star Alliance status, and passing this dude who's now trying to bring down priority security across Germany, and not you know, not if the on-air podcast has anything to do with it, buddy. So
we'll be having a word with,
yes,
with some German officials.
We've consulted our legal team, and we will have further updates. It's funny because sometimes the whole, you know, the ultra VIP, so not the kind of fast track queues, but as you say, the ultra VIP, which is used by government ministers and so on and so on, such as, for example, what the royal family use at Heathrow. So Heathrow VIP, the Windsor Suite. So last time I did the Windsor Suite, on departure at Heathrow, I mean, people think, okay, that's going to be so glamorous. So yeah, okay, you got in a car all the way across to Terminal 4, which took forever because one of the taxiways was closed. So going from Terminal 5 to Terminal 4, I think I was in the car for about 22 minutes. And then, in order to board the aircraft, walk up this fire escape and into the kitchen of Terminal 4 and through the kitchen and like, hi, excuse me, sorry, yeah, oh, mind that hot soup, just passing me, yeah, I'm serious.
Grab
and
a
then,
few samples along the way.
well, you know me and hygiene and
Yeah.
OCD stuff. Me seeing the kitchen didn't do much to put faith in purchasing or consuming food at Heathrow. I know. I mean, it wasn't as bad as I thought, but still, it's just not something that I shouldn't be taken there. Yeah, because you know what I'm like and overthinking that kind of stuff. Anyway, so go through the kitchen and then like out this fire exit door of the kitchen, which is adjacent to the gate that I was boarding. And I remember there was like a backpacker on his phone using a charger opposite, and he looked like, and obviously we were being escorted by the Heathrow VIP team and straight through, and he looked like, what the hell? Like, what did, like, I could see him kind of adjust his neck to check, isn't that a kitchen? You know, but that's how it is always. So anyway, the reason I was saying that is because to the lawyer guy in Germany who's stuck in that queue, look, it's not always as it's not always glamorous, buddy. So maybe it was better off where you were in the queue. And also, not all German airports have it, do they? For example, Frankfurt Airport security, the security by the gates for the non-Schengen internationals spring to mind. That is awful, and they are the ones that take out your whole life of your bag and then leave it and say, thank you. And then you have to stand there and pack for an hour.
Do they even say thank you? I don't think they do.
No, they don't say thank you. I thought it as I said it. They don't say, yeah.
But some parts at Frankfurt Airport do have priority for people with status or
I
flying
think
a
it's
higher
mostly in
cabin.
the Schengen areas.
Yeah.
But those gates you know the gates I'm talking about, right? For example, when you're flying to Doha from Frankfurt, and you've got flights to Doha and to Saudi and to
Oh yes, because that is now from the other terminal. I always
Yes.
forget if it's terminal 1 or 2.
one.
But
I think it's
yeah.
one. I think it's one. Yeah. Which is,
Yeah.
security is just before those gates, and you have to decide: are you going to go to the gates where there's nothing, or are you going to stay before security where there's basically still nothing, but there's supposedly something? God, I hate Frankfurt Airport. Goodness
Well,
me.
you need to try VIP services. It makes it a whole lot nicer, I'll tell you.
I'll
But
do it when I have this guy's email address and we can send him a photo.
exactly. Yeah, it's an interesting discussion as well. Our opinions are obviously, we're no legal experts, so we can't say if it's actually illegal. I just feel like this is some like bitter guy who
Me too.
didn't want to pay for. I mean, also, this is not only rich people. This is people who have to sometimes fly a lot in economy class for work. They're flying like every week in some horrible intra-European ironing board economy class, and you're trying to deny them a little bit more comfort so that they at least don't have to stand in security for 30
that they
minutes
don't have to,
in order to make the German economy go round. Like,
or that they
what?
don't have to arrive 2.5 hours before for example, for a domestic German flight where they're commuting home or they're commuting. There's so many people that commute across the Schengen area to and from work by plane. It's naive to still paint aviation as this kind of sexy, elitist. Oh, that's because that's for. No, there's, as you say, there's people grafting. There's people there because that's their work and so on. Speaking of queues, pleased to announce this week that Delta have updated their boarding process. Hooray! US carrier, they've updated their boarding process. So as of May 2024, Delta will be making these changes to their boarding process. The reason it's headliney is because they have reduced the number of boarding groups for the aircraft. So now there's only 901, and basically, which is more boarding groups than there are passengers. And so basically now
everyone is in their own boarding group.
And their friend who's not on the flight. So now, first, customers who need more time or assistance will be invited to board, followed by active military members, followed by Delta 360 members, followed by Delta One customers, or Delta First Class customers, followed by Delta Diamond Medallion members, and Delta Premium Select Cabin for certain aircraft, followed by Early Access, which is customers traveling with car seats and strollers, followed by all passengers in Zone 3, Delta Comfort Plus, Zone 4, Delta Sky Priority, Platinum and Gold Medallions, Flying Blue Platinum and Gold, Virgin Atlantic, Flying Club Gold, Sky Team Elite Plus, LATAM, Pass, Black Signature, Black, Platinum Elite, WestJet Rewards, Platinum and Gold Elite, followed by Zone 5, Main Cabin 1 for Delta, WestJet, Flying Blue, Virgin Atlantic, Flying Club Silvers, Delta Corporate Travelers, Delta Sky Miles Gold, Platinum Reserve, Amex, SkyTeam Elite, LATAM Gold Plus and Elite, followed by Zone 6, all passengers in Main Cabin 2, followed by Zone 7, all passengers in Main Cabin 3, followed by Zone 8, those passengers who have purchased a basic economy class fare, followed by cats, dogs, insects, lice, sand grains, and cockroaches, because cockroaches will be the last living things on the earth when the world ends. So, by the way, none of that was a joke. Okay, apart from the insects bit, none of that was a joke.
Can I just say,
this is nuts?
Yeah, can I just say, having spending 2 weeks in Asia, mainly Southeast Asia, you board a flight in 30 minutes, a wide body, a 777, you board in 30 minutes, and they go business class and economy. That's how it works. Everyone goes on board, very orderly, lines up, doesn't block the aisle, super efficient, and you're ready to go on time. I don't know how this helps. I know that, not all cultures are as geared for efficiency. That's normal, but
That's being polite.
exactly. But it's just like, how does this help? Like, why don't you just make it priority and economy? Make it two groups and just figure it out.
Even British Airways have fallen victim to this. So they're worried at BA that there's too many people who qualify for Group 1, right? So Group 1 would typically be those that are in business class and those that have elite status. So, for example, BA Executive Club Gold or the One World Emerald equivalent. Okay? Because there are so many frequent flyers flying BA, they've now introduced Group 0.
Yeah.
So now there's 0 and then 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then they were worried that they were all the BA frequent flyers were complaining to BA that when you go to outstation airports, for example, if you're flying from Madrid to Heathrow, sometimes they get lazy because, of course, their priority is to board the aircraft, not just to sit here and stroke everybody's ego. They will announce, we're now boarding groups 1 to 3, and the group 1s were furious. Yeah,
it's the same in Gothenburg. They just don't even do priority. Not surprising. They just go, okay, everyone's welcome to board, and chaos ensues.
Yeah, it's mad. And then also you get I find you get people are so touchy about it as well, especially on BA. The amount of times I've been, for example, with my family, and we're standing for boarding, and we would board with Group 1 because I have one World Emerald, and also because I'd probably need the locker space. Otherwise, believe me, I would be the happiest person ever to board absolutely last. Boarding first I don't see how it's even sold as some kind of benefit if you have no requirement to have the space in the overhead locker. And then the tap on the shoulder, excuse me, sorry, I'm Group 1. The guy behind me says, no, look at him. And I say, great, so you're in the right place. Yeah, which is also behind me. Okay,
well done.
You know. Yeah, let me just check. He says, excuse me, I'm like, oh, good, because I wouldn't want anyone who's Group 2 behind me. So you're in the right place, buddy. You know, like, it's somehow insinuating that maybe,
you shouldn't be there.
Oh, God, honestly. So anyway, now BA have stroked the egos of the gold guest list, who are the top tier frequent flyer for British Airways Executive Club specifically. They will now board with group.
With grope. They all get groped.
What a slip of the tongue, goodness me. With Group 0. And I think that's something that has gone down quite well with them, because now they don't have to have one World Emeralds boarding at the same time as them. But I can't wait to see this in actual action, because I know how lazy the staff are at Malaga, for example, who board the BA flights. They're going to go like this. They're going to say, Group 0, Group 1, and literally before anyone can kind of even have stood up, you know. So
I see that.
It's bizarre.
It is, as you said, it's mainly about rewarding people who are paying more by stroking their egos, because when you have so many groups, there's no real benefit to being Group 3 instead of Group 5. It's just like you paid slightly more, or you're sitting in this seat, so you get to be Group 3. You know, you have this status, so silver gets to board before, you know, this other person, and then you feel special. It's just unnecessary. Unless the overhead lockers are going to be full in the US, that is a problem. So priority is a problem. Yeah,
everywhere it's a problem.
And I was surprised, because somehow in my mind I'm like, that's not a problem in the Middle East. Like, I'm like, Qatar Airways doesn't have that problem. But then I was texting you, flying their A3, or no, their 737 Max.
You wish you were on an A3 something.
I know. Flying it the other week, and they didn't know what to do because the overhead lockers were full, but they really don't want to gate check bags. So that was also quite
because everyone's
chaotic.
Connecting, so they don't want to gate check. I remember having to take Air Nostrum to Madrid all the time to get out of Spain, and you can only really leave out of Madrid if it's going to be long haul. And the amount of times the crew, even though I was in business, fake business, Air Nostrum business, would try to gate check my hand luggage, and I'd be like, nope. You cannot. This is a part of the whole business class thing. And if there's going to be one perk, then at least let it be that. Interestingly enough, do you know for the first 2 years, Air Nostrum banned Bluetooth earphones, and if you popped AirPods into your ears during the flight, they would come over and make such a scene, as if you just jeopardized the entire safety of the flight. But if you flew on Iberia mainline, it was all right.
Aviation rules sometimes are very funny.
It's so weird, isn't it? Let's look at Asia. Well, we've been very Asia-centric the whole podcast, but let's look at another development. Cathay Pacific are removing first class from their Boeing 777s, and that is because they're preparing for their new business class. So they're eliminating first class with the business class coming soon. It's the one that we spoke about previously announced Nothing too exciting, kind of sensible, not too revolutionary, very similar to what they have now, reverse herringbone, just an updated version. It's the Aria suite. It looks chic, it looks smart, but I think the decision is interesting as well, because here is another airline ripping out first class of the existing cabin in space for business class. But Cathay Pacific will eventually introduce a new first class. That's going to be what's the name of the suite, the first class suite that Cathay's at?
I'm not sure. We haven't seen it yet, but some of the mock-ups.
I know what it is. It's I nearly called it the Angel Suite. It's not the Angel Suite. It's the Halo Suite.
Okay, but we don't know what it will be like.
But we don't know what it looks like, and that's only going to be on the Boeing 777-9, the 777X, which of course hasn't been certified yet. God knows when it's going to be certified.
I've seen some mock-ups that look absolutely insane, next level, truly. Like, I saw one that's like almost like a bunk bed type of thing, except so you have your seat like downstairs, and then you go up and have a full length comfortable bed with a real mattress above it. Those types of.
Wow.
I've just seen the most amazing I've seen like somewhere, so you have like a bunk bed, but you can combine two seats into one like huge living room on a 777X, and the seats would be like a single aisle on a 777X. I'm so excited to see what they come up with. I really hope some of those mock-ups are correct, because that would be amazing. But yeah, as Alex is saying, this leaves some question marks as to, in the meantime, what happens to their first class when they're removing it. And we don't know when the 777X will be ready. Right now, things aren't looking too good for Boeing getting that certified anytime soon.
And with that, we have some questions similar to this topic, so let's move into Q&A. David is asking if we can speak a little more on what has happened with United and them being forbidden to expand internationally now due to the FAA review.
Okay, this is interesting. It goes back to what we spoke about earlier in the episode, how there's increased scrutiny in the US, obviously, given recent developments. United, we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago as well, has had a series of incidents that most of them haven't been too dangerous. It's just a combination of increased media scrutiny and people being paranoid and more attention on safety. So the FAA is trying to show they care and step it up. So they've put United under investigation to make sure they are properly maintaining their planes and whatnot. So part of that is that United is not allowed to launch any new international routes during that time. And luckily for United, they expanded hugely internationally last year. In the past couple of years after COVID, they launched a lot of new routes. So many of those are seeing equipment upgrades or frequency boosts. But they had two new routes for this summer that were supposed to launch. One being Newark to, I think, Faro in Portugal, and the other being Cebu, Philippines to Tokyo, which is a funny route, but United has a hub in Guam, so they operate all types of triangle routes or tag-ons in the region. That was
a fifth freedom, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was a fifth freedom between Tokyo and Cebu.
Yeah. So both of those routes have now been postponed until summer 2025, according to the airline. But it is interesting to see real-life consequences following this safety development.
And of course, the reason why the FAA is increasing its oversight of United is what they say is to ensure that the airline is complying with safety regs, but also that they are actively identifying hazards and mitigating risks, managing all of this safely. The FAA specifically said, quote, that certification activities in process may be allowed to continue, but future projects are now delayed based on findings from oversight. We know that there have been a string of different hiccups across United. Do you remember I read that long list, that bizarre list of what had happened at United over the last 4 weeks? A lot of it on Boeing aircraft, but not all. And, there's just this feeling, isn't there, right now, of those things are not going, there's all different kinds of different safety flaws being exposed, specifically with US aviation. So the FAA has hit pause on expansion here, and that's typically what happens when they place an airline under review, and that's what's happens with United. So hopefully that answered your question, David.
Yusuf says, "Hi Dan, love the podcast. It's the thing I look forward to most every Wednesday." By the way, just quick tangent to this. I don't know about you, but I'm genuinely shocked when I realized that people actually listen to the podcast. Like, I know people listen, but
thousands and thousands listen.
Yeah, but I was just so shocked. Like when we didn't post last week and I got so many messages from people being like, Dan, I missed the podcast. You know, I sent you so many screenshots of these sweet messages.
Yeah.
Genuinely, thank you so much, guys. It made us
amazing.
so happy.
It's amazing.
So to continue Yusuf's question, he says, I wanted to ask about oversold flights. Why would an airline sell more seats than what they have and end up paying compensation to those who are bumped? Doesn't that beat the point of maximizing the profit through sales?
Well, basic airline economics is that the airlines need to make sure that every flight is as full as possible, right? And having the flight as full as possible maximizes their chances of that flight being profitable. So the airlines cover themselves by overselling on routes, and there's really sophisticated levels of data that show how they can oversell without being in a situation where they're constantly having to bump and then compensate passengers. So if you look at it as a trade-off, more often than not, statistically, they are able to oversell and not have to bump because statistically X number of passengers miss that flight, miss that connection, don't show up, and so on and so on. So when you look at it that way, you know that it's still worth doing that than, for example, worrying about the cost of having to compensate bumped passengers. And believe me, if airlines were the ones having to constantly swallow the bill for, you know, a constant stream of compensation for bumping passengers, they wouldn't be overselling. It wouldn't make airline economic sense, and therefore they wouldn't be doing it. So the fact that they are doing it is because it continues to make sense to oversell, and that's why airlines overbook. It's not anything malicious. It's an economic way to maximize revenue and ensure flights are full. And no shows are routine, as are flexible ticket holders who may, you know, decide not to travel on that flight at the last minute and so on.
Yeah. So in conclusion, it comes down to an advanced algorithm telling airlines what makes most sense. It's not just like, oh, let's sell this many seats. It's based on previous, you know, patterns of people missing flights and stuff like that. I have another question here from Venkat. I think that's how you pronounce it. He says, huge fan of the podcast. I have a question about Emirates. Basically, why they only have 2 aircraft, 777s and A380s. Isn't that a huge waste of resources for smaller routes or empty flights? Shouldn't a company like Emirates have smaller planes for smaller routes?
Well, they did, didn't they? They had A330s. They haven't had single aisles. But Emirates' fleet, as you say now, is dominated by the 777 and the A380s, meaning it's not perfect, as you can guess, on some of the slimmer, thinner routes that don't have that mass market demand, or certainly don't have the demand to fill up something like an A380. But in order for them to remain agile and respond to the need to increase frequencies, the need to be able to adapt to flying to secondary markets and so on, Emirates is taking delivery soon of their first batch of Airbus A350s. So that's definitely an aircraft, because they're taking the A350-900, the smaller of the 2 variants, something that's going to enable them to be a little more agile in responding to those slimmer, thinner routes. And that's always, I think, the territory that Emirates has been in terms of wide bodies. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's just, you know, it comes down to efficiency. It comes down to the routes they serve. Sometimes they're okay with having emptier flights because they can fill it with cargo. There's always a lot of cargo coming in and out in the Middle East. But, you know, in the future, we'll see them, downgrading some of their aircraft types to offer less capacity. They outsource smaller routes to Fly Dubai. That's just the model they have chosen.
And Fly Dubai's sister ship with Emirates here is incredibly important, because Fly Dubai operate many routes that are slimmer and thinner that Emirates do not, and that's why Emirates are able to pass on that to responsibility to its sister Fly Dubai, and so it kind of makes nice sense there. But of course, Fly Dubai themselves will be entering into the wide body market world soon after orders that they placed earlier last year, and that's simply to increase capacity, not because they want to contradict Emirates' strategy, but because they know that if they're able to fill up an aircraft of 180 seats, they know on some routes they can do that if their aircraft had 300 seats or 350 seats, and so on and so on. So it's good, and we always keep an eye on what is happening in the Gulf, because it is one of the beating hearts of global aviation and an incredibly
100%.
important market.
Yeah. We have so many more questions. I'm just going to end with this. A message from Khalil, which was so sweet. He says, well, last week when we didn't have an episode, he says, tragic, Wednesday ruined. Love the podcast. So basically his question is, what are our thoughts on frequent flyer programs moving to spend-based earning instead of distance-based earning? Isn't this going to intrinsically lead to accelerated points inflation? And we'll see economy class tickets going for 1 million points in our lifetime.
I will let you take this one because this is definitely your area. I mean, I have an opinion on it, but I'm more interested to hear from you.
So I think there's two layers to this. Of course, it's interesting because I think Khalil is also asking two separate questions. In terms of earning points, it's difficult because the airlines, of course, want to reward people who spend the most. So the more you spend, logically, the more points you should earn. So in that sense, offering spend-based points earning is the most sensible thing. On the other hand, there is something to be said about gamifying your frequent flyer program a bit and offering, sweet spots where people who really want to learn about it and geek out can do it to earn status easier, to get extra points by doing this or this trick. And I think that if airlines remove that entirely, it disincentivizes people from engaging with the program and trying to find those little hacks. So for me, I think there's a sweet spot. I think you can, maybe at least lower earnings for cheaper fares without going completely spend-based, or making the program so that it does incentivize higher spend, but also leave some of those little tricks so that people can earn status by being clever and reading about it. Because, the more you engage with something, the more you're going to care about it, the more you're going to ultimately be, passionate about engaging with it and the airline. So that's a bit tricky. And then, I think his second question is kind of asking if we see spend-based redemptions. So for example, Qantas just rolled out a spend-based redemption option. So the points price changes based on the ticket price. That is a double-edged sword. Of course, if the economy ticket is super expensive, then the points ticket will be super expensive as well. But sometimes, especially I think for redeeming for economy class, the points tickets are actually much worse value than paying cash. So in some instances, when a cash ticket, let's say it's on sale, there's something super cheap, using Qantas as an example, let's say you want to fly from Sydney to Perth, there's a cash sale, you'll then be able to redeem less points. So what's good about Qantas, what I like about how they've implemented it, is that they're keeping regular awards as well. So when there is award space, although Qantas has very, very, very bad award space, but when there is, you can redeem and get some sweet spots. But when there isn't, you can also pay pay points with a cash equivalent and sometimes get a good deal, but also sometimes get a really bad deal.
I think people should sign up to your masterclass.
I do think they should.
And then they don't have to worry about any of that, and they can let you do all of it, right?
Well, that's not really how it works, but they'll learn how to become masters at doing all this stuff as well. So I agree.
Good. Well, by the way, it was lovely to see you last week.
Yes, we haven't even spoken about that. But
it was great to see you. Great, we had nice pizza. I hope it was all right.
Great to meet your dad. That was fun.
Yes, we enjoyed it. It was really nice. We had a good evening with you, and it's always sweet that you say to me, oh yeah, it's fine. You know, I have until about 9:30 p.m. and then I'm gonna need to go to bed because I've got an early start. And then it's just such a big mistake to tell me that because I'm like, so dinner at 9:30?
Literally. And then you always have a backup friend ready. So you're like, Dan
No,
will
it's
actually
not.
go to bed at 10. So I'm going to invite my other friend every single time to meet up at 10. And I'm like, how late are you out? Like, doesn't make
Well,
sense to me.
Firstly, he was with us, so it's not a backup. I was seeing him anyway, and then of course you ambushed me, so I'm like, okay, we merge them together, right? No, but
I don't think that's how it worked.
the late nights have been because it's been Ramadan, so the only time to see people has been late at night. But
Every other time I've been there, it has not been Ramadan. And you've been like, okay, you're going to bed. It's 10. All right, well, let me call up this person and we're going to be out until
no, I don't call up.
midnight.
I say to you, okay, well, you know, just because you're going to bed doesn't mean I am. Perhaps I have other plans, which has been the case. By the way, plans that you're more than welcome to join, but you don't because you decide. But anyway, I don't know why I'm roasting you because you did stay up late on this occasion. You did. You did do well, and then
Yeah.
I let you go at what 11 something or midnight or whatever it was after I
very
had
late.
yeah. Anyway, it was good to see you and good to record with you as ever on this Wednesday episode of On Air. Thank you, and feel free to write in with your questions, your thoughts on anything that we've said, or potential talking points, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Yes. Until then, wait, that's not what we say here. That's what I say on Nonstop Dan. I say fly safe. But we will see you all next week on air. Bye-bye.
See you later.